Hey guys, it's Penelope in London, and what I'm doing is continuing with the book Aion. It's also to do with Carl Jung, and I'm going to read the second section. I did part one of the self. I've done a couple of videos the last few days. I did part one of the book, which was when I say part one, chapter one is the ego. Chapter 2 is the shadow, chapter 3 is the anima and the animus, and then chapter 4, which I'm doing now. I did part 1 yesterday. I read so many paragraphs, and I'm going to finish up reading the part of that book on the self. I'm going to link it into some astrology. So I'm going to bring in some astrology charts towards the end as I read this and explain to you about the sun in astrology, because that ultimately would be the self. So what I'm going to do now is go to this slide here, and this is the book that I'm reading from. So do go back to the first video to get the first part of this so that you understand it fully. Or also you can get this on PDF, this book, which you can then begin to read yourself. So what I'm doing now is reading paragraph 51 and continuing. So when I say that the impulses which we find in ourselves should be understood as the will of God, I will wish to emphasize that they ought not to be regarded as an arbitrary wishing and willing, but as absolutes, which one must learn how to handle correctly. The will can control them only in part. It may be able to suppress them, but it cannot alter their nature. And what is suppressed comes up again in another place in altered form, but this time loaded with a resentment that makes the otherwise harmless natural impulse our enemy. I should also like the term God in the phrase, the will of God, to be understood, not so much in the Christian sense as in the sense intended by Diotima, when she said, Eros, dear Socrates, is a mighty daemon. The Greek word daimon and daimonion, I think that says, expresses a determining power which comes upon man from outside, like providence or fate, through the ethical decision, though the ethical decision is left to man. He must know, however, what he is deciding about and what he is doing. Then if he obeys, he is following not just his own opinion, and if he rejects, he is destroying not just his own invention. Paragraph 52. The purely biological or scientific standpoint falls short in psychology because it is, in the main, intellectual only. That this should be so is not a disadvantage, since the methods of natural science have proved a great heuristic value in psychological research. But the psychic phenomenon cannot be grasped in its totality by the intellect, for it consists not only of meaning, but also of value. And this depends on the intensity of the accompanying feeling tones. Hence, at least two rational functions are needed in order to map out anything like a complete diagram of a given psychic content. Paragraph 53. If therefore, in dealing with psychic contents, one makes an allowance not only for intellectual judgments, but for value judgments as well, not only is the result a more complete picture of the content in question, but also one gets a better idea of the particular position it holds in the hierarchy of the psychic contents in general. The feeling value is very important criterion which psychology cannot do without, because it determines in large measure the role which the content will play in the psychic economy. That is to say, the effective value gives the measure of the intensity of an idea, and the intensity of it expresses that idea's energetic tension, its effective potential. The shadow, for instance, usually has a decidedly negative feeling value. So let's get that bit again. So he's saying that the shadow, for instance, usually has a decidedly negative feeling value, while the anima and the animus has more of a positive one, whereas the shadow is accompanied by more or less definite and describable feeling tones. The anima and the animus exhibit feeling qualities that are harder to define. Mostly, they are felt to be fascinating or numinous, Often they are surrounded by an atmosphere of sensitivity, touchy reserve, secretiveness, painful intimacy, and even absoluteness. The relative autonomy of the anima and the animus figures expresses itself in these qualities. In order of effective rank, they stand to show to the shadow very much as the shadow stands in relation to the ego consciousness. The main effective emphasis seems to lie on the latter. At any rate, it is able by means of a considerable expenditure of energy to repress the shadow, at least temporarily. But if for any reason the unconscious gains the upper hand, then the valency of the shadow and of the other figures increases proportionately, so that the scale of values is reserved. What lay furthest away from waking consciousness and seemed unconscious assumes, as it were, a threatening shape, and the effective value increases the higher up the scale you go. Ego consciousness, shadow, anima, self. The reversal of the conscious waking state occurs regularly during the transition from waking to sleeping, and what then emerge most vividly are the very things that they were unconscious by day. Every abasement, I think that says, he's a bit, I think, du niveau, I think it says, mental brings about a relative reversal of values. And this is 54. So excuse me with some of the words here. This is not something I've read before. So some of these words that I'm reading here, I'm going to mark off and go back and study what they mean. Particularly, it sounds like it's French to me, but I'll keep going. Paragraph 54. I am speaking here of the subjective feeling value, which is subject to the more or less periodic changes described above. But there are also objective values which are founded in conses omnium, moral, aesthetic, and religious values, for instance. And these are universally recognized ideals of feeling-toned collective ideas. Lévi-Brul's representations collectives. The subjective feeling tones or value quanta are easily recognized by the kind and number of constellations or symptoms of disturbances they produce. Collective ideals often have no subjective feeling tone, but nevertheless retain their feeling value. This value, therefore, cannot be demonstrated by subjective symptoms, though it may be by the attributes attaching to these collective ideas and by their characteristic symbolism, quite apart from their suggestive effects. This is paragraph 55. The problem has a practical aspect, since it may easily happen that a collective idea, though significant in itself, is, because of its lack of subjective feeling tone represented in a dream only by a subsidiary attribute. And when a god is represented by his theomorphic attribute, etc., conversely, the idea may appear in consciousness lacking the effective emphasis that properly belongs to it and must then be transposed back into an archetypal context, a task that is usually discharged by poets and prophets. Thus, Holderlin, in the Hymn of Liberty, lets the concept worn stale by frequent use and misuse rise up again in pristine splendor. So I'm going to read what it says here. Since her arm out of the dust has raised me, beats my heart so boldly and serene, and my cheek still tingles with her kisses, flushed and glowing where her lips have been. Every word she utters by her magic rises new created without flaw. Hearken to the tidings of my goddess, hearken to the sovereign and adore. This is now 56 paragraph. It is not difficult to see here that the idea of liberty has been changed back into its original dramatic state, into the shining figure of the anima, freed from the weight of the earth and the tyranny of the senses, the psychopomp who leads the way to Elysian fields. Again, I might have pronounced that bit wrong. Elysian fields. 57. Paragraph. The first case we mentioned, where the collective idea is represented in a dream by a lowly aspect of self, is certainly the more frequent. The goddess appears as a black cat, and the deity as the lapis exilis, stone of no worth. interpretation then demands a knowledge of certain things which has less to do with zoology and mineralogy than with the existence of an historical consensus omnium in regard to the object in question. These mythological aspects are always present, even though in a given case they may be unconscious. It is, it, if, for instance, one doesn't happen to recall when considering whether to paint the garden gate green or white, that green is the color of life and hope. The symbolic aspect of green is nevertheless present as an unconscious sus entunde du, it says, I believe. So we find something which has the highest significance for the life of the unconscious standing lowest on the scale of conscious values and vice versa. The figure of the shadow already belongs to the realm of bodiless phantoms, not to speak of the anima and the animus, which do not seem to appear at all except as projections upon our fellow human beings. As for the self, it is completely outside the personal sphere and appears, if at all, only as a religious mythologium, and its symbols range from the highest to the lowest. Anyone who identifies with the daylight half of his psychic life will therefore declare the dreams of the night to be null and void. Notwithstanding that the night is as long as the day, and that all consciousness is manifestly founded on unconsciousness, is rooted in it, and every night is extinguished in it. What is more, psychopathology knows with tolerable certainty what the unconscious can do to the conscious, and for this reason devotes to the unconscious an attention that seems incomprehensible to the layman. We know, for instance, that what is small by day is big at night, and the other way round. Thus, we also know that besides the small by day, there also looms the big by night, even when it is invisible. So just stopping there, a bit of, I dream, I see, every night I sleep, the first, 20 minutes, I see morphing of faces or visuals in and out. There's no sound. Some of them are in color. Generally, I'm seeing people eye to eye, people I've not seen before. So I'm processing something, when we're going into that sleep state. And to me, sleep is not separated from my waking life. They're both just as important to me. Some people say they don't dream, some people do. We're all at different levels of, with our unconscious, conscious and unconscious. So we can, if you do dream, then we can see the symbols in the dreams of what they mean. And often we might go to somebody else and say, oh, what do you think my dream meant? But really, only we can really work out what our dreams meant. We can discuss them, but we come to our own conclusions because they're either going to be life-giving or life-draining, or we're going to, they're going to have something that's beautiful about them or something that's scary. There's so many aspects to it, but we know inside ourselves what the demons we're fighting, and the beauty as well, and the numinous. Paragraph 58. This knowledge is an essential prerequisite for any integration. That is to say, a content can only be integrated when its double aspect has become conscious and when it is grasped not merely intellectually, but understood according to its feeling value. Intellect and feeling, however, are difficult to put into one harness. They conflict with another by definition. Whoever identifies with an intellectual standpoint will occasionally find his feeling confronting him like an enemy in the guise of the anima. So the anima is the feminine in the masculine, and the animus is the masculine in the feminine. I'm saying it a bit too simply there, don't take it literal, but that's the idea that Jung is talking about. So conversely, an intellectual animus will make violent attacks on the feeling standpoint. Therefore, anyone who wants to achieve the difficult feat of realizing something, not only intellectually, but also according to its feeling value, must, for better or worse, come to grips with the anima-animus problem in order to open the way for a higher union, a conscientio op o cintorium. Some of these words I'm not getting, but you get the idea. So this is an indispensable prerequisite for wholeness. So to become whole, we have to understand different parts of ourselves. And it's not about becoming, the masculine or becoming the feminine. It's about understanding and integrating the different parts inside of us. It took me a long time to begin to even get my head around, what this meant to me. It's taken me a few years, but I'm beginning to digest or integrate something of an understanding. And part of that is that my imprints will make me act a particular way, and then I have a shadow, and when I understand my shadow, then as we understand our shadow, we stop projecting outwardly, and the anima and the animus fits into this, our projections as well. So 59, paragraph 59. Although wholeness seems at first sight to be nothing but an abstract idea like anima and animus, it is nevertheless empirical in so far as it is anticipated by the psyche in the form of spontaneous or autonomous symbols. There are quaternity or Mandela symbols which occur not only in dreams of modern people who have never heard of them, but are widely disseminated in the historical records of many peoples and many epochs. Their significance as symbols of unity and totality is amply confirmed by history as well as the empirical psychology. What at first looks like an abstract idea stands in reality for something that exists and can be experienced, that demonstrates a priori presence, spontaneity. Wholeness is thus an objective factor that confronts the subject independently of him, like the anima or the animus. And just as the latter have a higher position in the hierarchy than the shadow, so wholeness lays claim to a position and a value superior to those of the syzygy. The syzygy seems to represent at least a substantial portion of it, if not actually two halves of the totality formed by the royal brother-sister pair, and hence the tension of opposites from which the divine child is born as a symbol of unity. And this is paragraph 60. So unity and totality stand at the highest point on the scale of objective values because their symbols can no longer be distinguished from the imago. D-I-E, I think that's die. And then he says, hence all statements about the God image apply also to the empirical symbols of totality. Experience shows that individual Mandalas are symbols of order, and they occur in patients principally during times of psychic disorientation or reorientation. As magic circles, they bind and subdue the lawless powers belonging to the world of darkness and depict or create an order that transforms the chaos into a cosmos. The Mandala at first comes into the conscious mind as an unimpressive point or dot, and a great deal of hard and painstaking work, as well as the integration of many projections, are generally required before the full range of the symbol can be anything like completely understood. If this insight were purely intellectual, it could be achieved without much difficulty, for the worldwide pronouncements about the God within and above us and Christ and the corpus mysticum, the personal and suprapersonal atom, etc., are all formulations that can easily be mastered by the philosophic intellect. This is the common source of the illusion that one is then in possession of the thing itself, but actually one has acquired nothing more than its name, despite the age-old prejudice, and the name magically represents the thing, and that is sufficient to pronounce the name in order to posit the thing's existence. In the course of the millennia, the reasoning mind has been given every opportunity to see through the futility of this conceit, though that has done nothing to prevent the intellectual mastery of a thing from being accepted at its face value. It is precisely our experiences in psychology which demonstrate as plainly as could be wished that the intellectual grasp of a psychological fact produces no more than a concept of it, and that a concept is no more than a name. Flatus vocis, he says. These intellectual counters can be bandied about easily enough. They pass lightly from hand to hand, for they have no weight or substance. They pound full, but are hollow, and though purporting to designate a heavy task and obligation, they commit to nothing. The intellect is undeniably useful in its own field, but is a great cheat and illusionist outside of whenever it tries to manipulate values. This is 61. It would seem that one can pursue any science with the intellect alone, except psychology, whose subject, the psyche, has been more than the two aspects meditated by sense perception and thinking. The function value, feeling, is an integral part of our conscious orientation and ought not to be missing in a psychological judgment of any scope. Otherwise, the model we are trying to build of the real process will be incomplete. Every psychic process has a value quality attached to it, namely, it's a feeling tone. This indicates the degree to which the subject is affected by the process or how much it means to him, insofar as the process reaches consciousness at all. It is through the effect that the subject becomes involved and so comes to feel the whole weight of reality. The difference amounts roughly to that between a severe illness, which one reads about in a textbook, and the real illness which one has. In psychology, one possesses nothing unless one has experienced it in reality. Hence, a purely intellectual insight is not enough, because one knows only the words and not the substance of the thing from the inside. From inside. 62, paragraph 62. There are far more people who are afraid of the unconscious than one would expect. They are even afraid of their own shadow. And when it comes to the anima and animus, this fear turns to panic, for the syzygy does indeed represent the psychic contents that erupt into consciousness in a psychosis, most clearly all in a paranoid forms of schizophrenia. The overcoming of this fear is often a moral achievement and of unusual magnitude, and yet it is not the only condition that must be fulfilled on the way to a real experience of the self. Paragraph 63. So there are the shadow, the syzygy, and the self are psychic factors of which an adequate picture can be formed only on the basis of a fairly thorough experience of them, just as these concepts arose out of the experience of reality, so that they can be elucidated only by further experience. Philosophical criticism will find everything to object to in them unless it begins by recognizing that they are concerned with facts and that the concept is simply an abbreviated description of definition of these facts. Such criticism has as little effect on the object as zoological criticism on a duck-billed platypus. It is not the concept that matters. The concept is only a word, a counter, and it has a meaning and the use only because it stands for a certain sum of experience. Unfortunately, I cannot pass on this experience to my public. I have tried in a number of publications with the help of case material to present the nature of these experiences and also the method of obtaining them. Wherever my methods were really applied, the facts I give have been confirmed. One could see the moons of Jupiter even in Galileo's day if one took the trouble to use his telescope. 64, paragraph 64. Outside the narrower field of professional psychology, these figures meet with the understanding from all who have any knowledge of comparative mythology. They have no difficulty in recognizing the shadow as the adverse representative of the dark chitonic world, a figure whose characteristics are universal. The syzygy is immediately comprehensible as the psychic prototype of all divine couples. Finally, the self, on account of its empirical peculiarities, proves to be the eidos, I think it's EIDOS, so I have to check that out too, behind the supreme ideas of unity and totality that are inherent in all the monotheistic and monistic systems. This is paragraph 65. I regard these parallels as important because it is possible through them to relate so-called metaphysical concepts which have lost their root connection with natural experience, to live in universal psychic processes so that they can recover their true and original meaning. In this way, the connection is re-established between the ego and projected contents now formulated as metaphysical ideas. Unfortunately, as already said, the fact that metaphysical ideas exist and are believed in does nothing to prove the actual existence of their content or of the object they refer to, although the coincidence of the idea and the reality in the form of a special psychic state, a state of grace, should not be deemed impossible, even if the subject cannot bring it about by an act of will. Often, metaphysical ideas have lost their capacity to recall and evoke the original experience. They have not only become unless, but prove to be actual impediments on the road to wider development. One clings to possessions that have once meant wealth. One clings to possessions that have once meant wealth, and the more ineffective, incomprehensible, and lifeless they become, the more obstinately people cling to them. Naturally, it is only sterile ideas that they cling to. Living ideas have content and riches enough, so there is no need to cling to them. Thus, in the course of time, the meaningful turns into the meaningless. This is unfortunately the fate of metaphysical ideas. This is 66. I've got 66 and 67, two more paragraphs to read, and then I'm going to show you a chart, astrology. Paragraph 66. Today, it is a real problem what on earth such ideas can mean. The world, so far as it has not completely turned its back on tradition, has long ago stopped wanting to hear a message. It would rather be told what the message means. The words that resound from the pulpit are incomprehensible and cry for an explanation. How has the death of Christ brought us redemption when no one feels redeemed? In what way is Jesus a good man? In what way is Jesus a God man? And what is such a being? What is the Trinity about? And the parthenogenesis, the eating of the body and the drinking of the blood, and all the rest of it? What connection can there be between the world of such concepts and the everyday world, whose material reality is the concern of the natural science of the widest possible scale? At least 16 hours out of 24, we live exclusively in this everyday world, and the remaining 8 we spend preferably in an unconscious condition. Where and when does anything take place to remind us even remotely of the phenomena like angels, miraculous feedings, beauty tides, and resurrection of the dead, etc.? It was therefore something of a discovery to find that during the unconscious state of sleep's intervals occur called dreams, which occasionally contain scenes having a not inconsiderable resemblance to the motifs of mythology, for myths and miracles tales and treat all those things which very often are also objects of belief. So I had to think that about dreams. It's like when I dream, I see faces I've never seen before. I see people I've never seen before. I'm in situations I've never experienced before. I see items like of clothing or something, or that I've never seen before. So it's incredible that we hold this information within us, and the psyche can create so beautifully. And even in our waking life as well, when we're not sleeping, we have a great imagination. So this is paragraph 67. In the everyday world of consciousness, such things hardly exist. That is to say, until 1933, only lunatics would have been found in possession of living fragments of mythology. After this date, the world of heroes and monsters spread like a devastating fire over whole nations, proving the strange world of myth had suffered no loss of vitality during the centuries of reason and enlightenment. If metaphysical ideas no longer have such a fascinating effect as before, this is certainly not due to any lack of primivity in the European psyche, but simply and solely to the fact that the erstwhile symbols no longer express what is now welling up from the unconscious as the end result of the development of Christian consciousness through the centuries. This end result is a true imon, Pneuma, I think he says, Pneuma, a false spirit of arrogance, hysteria, woolly mindedness, criminal amorality, and doctrinary phantasism, a purveyor of shoddy spiritual goods, spurious art, philosophical stutterings, and utopian humbug fit only to be fed wholesale to the mass man of today. That is what post-Christian spirit looks like. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you a picture of Jung. I love him with all my heart so much. So now I'm going to go to a new share, and I'm going to bring up my astrology chart. So what I want you to do, if you've got your time of birth, please go to this site, and you'll be able to bring up your time of birth, your chart with your time of birth. You do need your time of birth. This is my chart where I was born, and date and place. And on the symbolism, you'll get the sun. So my sun is 0 degrees, 0.17 degrees of Gemini. And what you want to be looking at is the sun. So I'm going to explain to you what that means in astrology. This is the snapshot of the heavens at birth in the inner wheel. On the outer wheel of the chart, let me get my pointer. On the outer wheel of the chart, you've got the transits. So the sun is currently, if we go here, my sun is 0 degrees of Gemini at birth. It's currently at 15 degrees of Sagittarius. So the sun is currently at 15 degrees of Sagittarius. So I understand how to read these, and I help people through my evolutionary astrology to look at the psyche and look at our imprints, so that we get to evolve and get to do some deep work so that we can begin to become whole. That's the whole point of astrology. And we look at it that the chart's really playing out what are we feeling. You know, if I look at what I'm feeling right now, I can pick up on my chart. But if I was looking at somebody else's chart, it would indicate what the person's going through on an emotional level. So let's now look. So the sun, and then you can see aspects to the sun. Aspects are where you see all of these lines in the middle. These are aspects. They're different degrees and they hold different meanings. The trines are easy energy, the blue lines, and the red lines, that's an opposition, all of that opposing there. And then we have squares. There are different aspects. There are more, but I'm just keeping it simple. If we look here, you can see the sun symbol. All of this is transposed onto this. So I can read the chart here and I'll be able to understand what it says there. So the sun, this is a conjunction, Mercury, my sun, conjunct Mars, my sun, sextile to Jupiter. So see here? So my sun is conjunct my North Node, my Mars, and my Mercury. It's all in orb. And then it's also a sextile to my Jupiter up there, semi-sextile to my Jupiter. So the significance of the transiting sun, and the transiting sun is quite important in predictive astrology because the energy source of the solar system is also the energy source of the horoscope. The sign and the aspects to the natal sun have more influence over the general condition of the horoscope than any other planet, except possibly the moon. And the transiting sun's changing relationship to the natal sun determines how you react to the annular solar rhythm, because we have 360 degrees. So, you know, this is going to follow through. That sun, it's going to follow every year, it's going to follow through. But each year I'm evolving into a new being. You know, we keep waking up bit by bit. That's the plan, to become whole. That's the work of Jung, to get rid of our projections, look at our shadow, look at the anima, look at the animus. What are we doing inside? So, and the transiting sun changes relationship to the natal sun determines how you react to the annual solar rhythm, a cycle that is exceeded in importance only by the diurnal rhythm, which depends upon the apparent revolution of the sun around the earth every 24 hours. So physically, the sun rules the basic energy of the body and the body as an energy system. Consequently, the transiting sun can have a great effect on the feeling of health and vigor. So, you know, the sun will hit different planets, you know, definitely. So if it's 15 degrees there, I can give you an example how I can read this. So the sun is 15 degrees here. If we go to the middle of the chart, I've got 15 degrees, Isis and Pluto and Uranus here. So I've got a square going on to these planets today. So this will give me, this is in transit, and this will give me a definition of what my feeling place that I'm in. My Venus is 20, it's coming up to 20 degrees on my Neptune, and then it's going to hit my south node. Then it will go to my ascendant. So, and the planets are all moving at different speeds. The sun takes a year around the chart. Venus takes 224 days. Mercury takes 88 days. The moon takes 28 days, 28 and a half days. So the transiting sun also has to do with the men in general that we encounter, and the authority of either sex. Afflictions from the sun can indicate problems also with authority in men and such like. So I've just read that little bit from Planets in Transit by Robert Hand. You can get this brilliant book on aspects also. I'll put the link below in the comments section of my YouTube video that I'm going to upload. So then I'm going to also, because I haven't uploaded it yet, so let me just do a new share, and I'm going to go to this emanated page. So this is the 6th of December. This is the chart of today. So what we can see, if you go by hour, I'm just going to show you the sun. So let's go to the sun up here in Sagittarius. The sun is here, and it's the Mercury will catch up with the sun and they'll become conjunct. Let me show you that, because Mercury is 88 days and the sun takes a year. So let's go by days, and I'll just show you this symbol here. So watch the sun, watch Mercury. Mercury is our thinking and communication. That's 9 degrees, 10, 11, 12. And slowly but surely, and then it will conjunct. There you go, 23, Mercury, 25, 26, and they're both at 28 degrees. So on the 19th of December, Mercury will conjunct the sun. And then we've got this beautiful thing going on where we're going to have a conjunction of on the 21st, an exact conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, which is exciting for all of us. We've got big changes ahead. So I'm going to leave it there. If you want a session with me, please book me, or if you've got any questions, or comment below this video if you've got any thoughts on what I'm telling you, and also subscribe if you have not. Thanks for watching me. Catch you later.